Are we set? We're broadcasting?
Okay.
Are we broadcasting?
Let me find the question. Okay.
No, not yet. Not yet. I'm going to talk. Good evening. Please don't underestimate how inconceivably profound and how inconceivably powerful true spirituality is. The veil between dull normalcy of ordinary experience and absolute inconceivable transcendence is virtually non-existent. Simply noticing that your experience is not what you're used to thinking it is opening the doorway to engaging with this profundity. And this profundity is ultimately profound. It is bottomlessly deep. It is inconceivably transforming, liberating, and powerful. What is happening here, what this consists of, what your field of experience, your absolute normal experience consists of, is absolutely inconceivable. It's entirely, completely, and utterly beyond anything you've ever thought it is, anything you can think it is. It's literally unthinkable. This is the simple fact. Whether you notice it or not, it is the fact. And because it is the fact, it's possible to notice it. And simply in noticing it, simply in touching this fact of the inconceivability of experience, you enter into a new relationship with yourself, with your own being, which is the entry into true spirituality, the entry into unfolding to what this actually is, what you actually are. And I'm sorry? You might pull down the level too, because I'm not speaking for that. Okay? The practice of this is very simple. Simply noticing any experience, any simple experience, light shining through a window pane, or a sound of a bird or a sound of music, any sound that happens to strike your ear, and virtually any experience whatsoever, simply notice that it is more than you can say. It's subtle, it's nuanced, it's delicate, it's dimensional. It's not a simple thing. It's not just this or just that or just anything. On the contrary, it is a literally infinite dimensional presence which you cannot get to the bottom of, you can't get to the top of, you cannot pin down, you cannot define. And that simple noticing of any experience whatsoever, just any simple present actuality within your experience, that simple noticing is sufficient to completely transform your sense of yourself, and for this astoundingness to ultimately fully reveal itself as the actual condition of your experience. Which it already is that, but we don't notice it because we've been so dulled and brainwashed by the conditioning and education we've received as to what we are and what the world is and what experience is. But simply engaging with direct experience and noticing that it transcends intrinsically any of these normal conditions that we've been taught is sufficient to open the doorway to this fact. I believe there was a question on the internet.
Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. It's a while back. Where is it? Okay. Something they asked last session, but if you could talk on self and other, what am I supposed to make of the other person? Is he, she, me? And then further down it says, how should I treat this other person? In what way? That would be always without blame.
Always without what?
Blame.
Blame.
That's what it says.
Okay.
In other words, I guess without judgment or assessment, and
Right.
Even in a neutral way.
Well, self and other are arbitrary qualifications. Of course, all of your experience appears completely intimately within your experience, within your consciousness. Your own train of thought appears within your consciousness. The appearance of apparent other people appears within your consciousness. The sun and stars and the world appears within your consciousness. So qualifying some portions of these apparitions as self and certain portions of these apparitions as other is completely arbitrary and subject to definition. Because it's all essentially the same. It's all apparitions within consciousness. It's various energy qualities, we might call them, appearing within experience. And this being the case, there is no framework for blame or assessment, because these energy characteristics that appear within consciousness are unfathomable. You can't define them. You can't get to the end of them. You can't find finally and completely what anything is. And since you can't tell definitively what anything actually is, there's no basis for assessing simple judgments like right and wrong, simple judgments like relationships, so on and so forth. All of these things are intrinsically too subtle and too nuanced to be defined in a simplistic binary way as being either this or that. It's rather like an infinite symphony of qualities that's continually playing, with constantly new threads entering and leaving. How can you assess it? How can you assign a value judgment to it? It becomes very arbitrary to do so. Unless you arbitrarily erect guidelines, which is exactly what we do when we assess things. We arbitrarily decide, oh, this is good, this is bad, you know. If it supports the government, it's good. If it's, you know, if it supports the evildoers, it's bad. If it supports the people, it's good. If it supports big business, it's bad. You know, if it benefits all sentient beings, it's good. If any suffering occurs because of this, it's bad. You know, how can you assess these things? How can you actually get to the bottom of any of this? So these kinds of simplistic assessments, these kinds of simplistic ways of holding things, are just that, simplistic, and hence inaccurate, and hence fantastic. They aren't actual. They aren't actually the case.
When we fall in love or need someone, what is happening?
It can't be said what's happening. It's the play of unfathomable energies that appear mysteriously, appear unfathomably, and have their play. Motivations appear unbidden, unintentionally. Qualities appear unbidden, unintentionally, and all of these things dance around and do what they do, and you can't say what is being done in the final analysis, and after it's all over you can't even say what happened. John?
So would you say that we're in a predicament because of that state of affairs? Of not being able to say what anything is, or to make any judgments or whatever about things as they are?
Well, that actually reveals that we're not in a predicament. We're in a predicament when we think we know what things are, erroneously. Mm-hmm. When we acknowledge the actuality of our situation, we're free of predicaments because we're resting in actuality, which entirely takes care of itself.
And we're also not trying to come up with what it means or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. That's an aspect of that.
Yeah.
When you see that you can't define anything, then you're not wasting effort trying to, and more insidiously, you're not thinking you know what things are, and then reacting to them on the basis of that supposed knowledge. You let things be open-ended as they are, and then you can engage with them much more fluidly, much more intelligently, much more actually, in accordance with what they are, what you are, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. At the moment, at least, it does, yeah. I wonder, do you ever suffer because of the feeling of not being able to say anything more definitively about what's going on, or that sort of thing?
On the contrary, there is a profound resting in fullness, a resting in multidimensionality, a resting in lusciousness, mm-hmm. a resting in the actuality of the vitality of life force, which is doing itself inconceivably, not according to any set of rules or any set of patterning that anyone can fathom or knows anything about. Mm-hmm. And that's an actuality, and it is nourishing, it is empowering, and it is security, because the knowledge that you are resting in the absolute life force that is doing everything is as secure as you can possibly get.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter. Well, I want to address your opening remarks. I've been following these 4 crows that live outside my window. I've been following them a little bit and feeding them a little bit, and this woman was throwing out some salmon that she had had in her freezer for too long. She wasn't sure how good it was, so I said, well, give it to me, and I threw it out there, and I didn't actually see the crows take it, but it was gone, the next day. And then, I think it was last night, I looked at it, and about 7 o'clock, there was 4 crows, and they were just sort of doing a dance, probably before they went to roost, and they were sort of beautiful, just dancing and humming around, and rushing at each other. You almost thought they were going to hit each other, and then they'd veer at the last second, and just it's like a wild play or something like that. And, for me it was okay, but it wasn't unspeakable or anything like that. But I could imagine, say, if Emily Dickinson was looking out and seeing these, it would have been like a psychedelic experience for her or something. Yeah, so it wasn't unspeakable, but it was pretty good,
In what sense was it not unspeakable? Did you know what it was? Did you know what was happening? Do you have the final word on what was actually going on there?
No.
Do you have the final word on the way in which they were appearing within your consciousness? Do you have the final word on any aspect whatsoever of the experience?
No.
Well, that sounds pretty unspeakable to me.
Yeah. It was fun though. But anyway, okay, let me get on to the next question. Okay, I went to Berkeley, Massachusetts for 3 months, and everybody had to take a turn, timing an hour meditation and then hitting the gong. And so I was timing it, and it was like 59 minutes, and I thought, I'll give everybody a minute, break, and bang it in 59 minutes instead of an hour. But when I went to bang it, it was like I was not banging the gong. It was like some other entity was banging the gong. And I went back to my room, and after that, and I just kind of discounted that, and said, oh, you must be imagining it or something like that. And I never paid much attention to that again. And it never really got integrated into anything. But it was really interesting. I was not doing it. And that's the only time, 1 second,
What's the difference between I for you and some other entity? I mean, what's I?
Well, my I is my conditioning of who I am.
Yeah, but your conditioning of who you are exists in a context of that's outside that conditioning, right? Your conditioning of who you are is not the totality of your experience. It's a small portion of your experience.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the sun doesn't shine because of your conditioning of who you are, right? So what entity is doing the sun shining? And then you aren't doing who you are either. You're thinking thoughts. What's actually putting the thoughts in your mind? You decide to think every thought before you think it?
No.
Do you deliberately put the train of thought in your mind? So what entity is doing that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question.
Yeah. So whatever entity is doing that, I mean, why does it have to be an entity?
Yeah.
Why not just have the fact that this system, energies appear within this system spontaneously, and we're used to classifying them maybe in terms of entities and objects and systems and all that, but all that classification is pretty arbitrary if you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, in actuality, everything works the same. The sun appears within your experience pretty much the same way as thoughts appear within your experience. And we're used to thinking, oh no, the thoughts are mine, they're in my head, they're in my mind, and the sun is outside, it's over there, and it's doing itself. But nothing is doing your thoughts, and nothing is doing the sun. And is there any basis to suppose it's not the same nothing? Or the same something, as the case may be, the same unknown. Because all, let's call them energy occurrences, or appearances of characteristics, appearances of flavors, appear within experience spontaneously, unpredictably, uncontrolledly. They do what they do, unpredictably, uncontrollably, and then they disappear the way that they do, unpredictably, uncontrollably. And it all seems to happen, if you look at it, about the same way. I mean, when you get hungry and when the sun rises, both occur with the same kind of spontaneous occurrence. They're just there, out of nowhere, not being done by anyone, and so on and so forth. So, like I was talking about in the beginning of this evening's talk, what this is astounding, and we really have no basis for saying anything about it definitively, anything. And that being the case, our usual assessments of, was it me, or was it not me, or was it this, or was it that, if you look at it, it's kind of arbitrary. We're all used to doing this, and we do this very commonly, and as figures of speech and so on. But if you look at the basis for it, is there any real actual basis for that way of holding things? And I think if you look closely, you may notice that there isn't.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh. The way experience actually happens is very strange. And it all happens the same way. The way a dream happens is equally strange as to the way, traffic on the street in Berkeley happens. It's all just sort of these strange apparitions that do what they do, and unpredictably and unknowably, and you can't really get to the bottom of why these things appear, why these things disappear, how they do it, what they're made of, how they're being experienced, what's experiencing them. All of that is essentially a mystery. And not just a mystery because we're not looking close enough, but a mystery because that's what it is. It is intrinsically a mystery.
Peter, in the Longchenpa text, it talks about the indivisibility of luminosity and, forget the term, but knowing, consciousness and radiance as inseparable. Mm-hmm. It also says somewhere that to merely quiet the mind, that could be sort of a trap, because it would not have the quality of it would not have the alive quality.
Yes.
And I'm doing the best that I can on my own. I come here, that vivid, radiant quality is very evident, quite effortlessly. It just seems knowable. And on my own, I get intimations of that, and I reflect on that quite a bit, but the aliveness is most of the time sorely absent. So I guess it's just I just have to see it as a process.
Yeah, it's not actually absent, you just may be noticing it less. I mean, there is intrinsically aliveness in the sense that there is dynamism, there's the flow of time, there's the shining of light. I mean, all these things are an intrinsic liveness. In terms of the questions you had about Longchenpa, radiance and awareness, I mean, to use different terms, are one. We are used to classifying what appears as if it was objective and what perceives it as if it was subjective and as if they were two different things. But actually that's completely arbitrary. They're one thing. This presence shines forth as qualities, and it shines forth as perception, as experience. It's inconceivable and ungraspable how that is so. It's not a finite, simple condition, but it is directly knowable that that is so. And when you stop hypothesizing all sorts of subcategories of things that have some intrinsic difference, it all resolves itself into a much greater simplicity. Simply, this presence is present. There doesn't need to be a subject and an object. Why not just presence? How could that happen? Well, who can say how it could happen? But it is. So this presence includes what might be called awareness, and it includes what might be called radiance, liveliness, apparitional qualities. And those apparently two different ways of analyzing it, there's no reason to suppose they're not the same thing, because they always coexist. There's never awareness without qualities appearing to awareness, and there's never qualities appearing without awareness that it appears to.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part of your question. The second part, it's very easy to fantasize that some condition of absolute neutrality or dullness or stasis is the absolute. Some condition of absolute darkness, some condition of when nothing ever happens and it's just, some absolute zero. It's easy to fantasize that that is an ultimate and a desirable condition. But that is totally a fantasy. And it's possible, let's say potentially, to find oneself in that kind of experience, but to place any speciality on that experience is a mistake. Because it's exclusive. The transformative aspect of the absolute is that it is absolutely inclusive. In other words, it's inclusive of all qualities of experience, all experiential qualities, most of which are demonstrably not an absolute zero, a void, a blankness. Most qualities of experience are very much about presence and qualities and differentiation and all of that. And so a true understanding of the absolute has to include that. The absolute is absolutely inclusive of all of its modes, of all of its states, of all of its ways of appearing. And to suppose that some condition of stasis or absolute absence of thought or absence of event is some kind of a great thing is a fallacy.
To the extent that I can, even if it's just a very small extent, but to the extent that I can relax into that sense of being of presence, then in your view, would I not need to cultivate intentional concentration as...
No, absolutely not. Just as it is. Presence as it is, it's already concentrated to the extent it is intrinsically concentration. Concentration is already here. It doesn't need to look like something or look like something else. The most important aspect of all this is leave it as it is. However it is.
That's what Longchenpa keeps saying, yeah.
However it happens to be, that is the absolute. And it already is that, so just rest in that. Which simply means don't push it or pull it around or suppose it should be other than it is. If it looks like confusion, then that's it. If it looks like suffering, then that's it. If it looks like joy, then that's it. If it looks like dullness, then that's it. Whatever it looks like, it doesn't matter how you're qualifying it or the flavors you're attributing to it. Just rest in it, let go in it as it is, and you, first of all, you will discover that however it seems to be, it's intrinsically more than that. Because any qualities that seem to be dominant also include inconceivable other qualities that may be superficially less dominant but are actually present. So when you relax into situations as they are, as they present themselves, they intrinsically open to more. They open they expand into other subtle nuances that are simultaneously present that enrich the qualities that are actually present and ultimately spread to an infinite inclusiveness.
That's interesting. It's fascinating because it's almost this path. This is basically Dzogchen or whatever you want to call it. The key is to let be, and the habit of the mind is anything but that. It wants to manipulate or try and make it better. So it's actually very demanding in its own way. I mean, to
yeah. But the trick is let that happen, let that occur too. You don't need to control the mind. If the mind wants to chase around and have all these heavy-handed manipulations, just let it. Because again, that's only a very small portion of the field of experience. So the mind is over here doing its Machiavellian control freak thing, trying to name everything and classify everything and control everything. That's fine. But all the rest of experience is not in the mind. It is where it is, in its own dimensionality. And again, that dimensionality opens to greater dimensionality intrinsically. Even the mind transcends the mind, because the mind is apparently being these thoughts, being these arguments, chains of thoughts, whatever. But if you look at what's actually present, the energy that is present is subtler than that and other than that, and it is also ultimately infinitely dimensional. So even the mind that claims to be this shrewish linear thing, trying to control everything, is actually a fractal radiant energy presence.
The quality of my dreams changes as I'm processing or whatever, and what's generated in this dream world, it's utterly amazing. I mean, just how this is concocted by my mind is beyond me. It just, as you would say, the nuances and the subtle tones and how
and that is the path. The path is the nuances, and what you call my mind is just a name. It's not yours and it's not mine. Right. It can't be found what it actually is. It can't be specified what it actually is, because when you go looking for it, it opens. It's not nothing, but it opens into infinite dimensions, and you can't pin it down. You can't define it. You can't draw a circle around it. All apparent entities dissolve upon examination because they open to more than themselves. Just in terms of, if in no other way, just in terms of their nuance, in terms of their implications, but literally in terms of their substance, in terms of their characteristics, in terms of their flavors of energy, in terms of their spatiality, their experiential spatiality, and every category you could come up with, experience is intrinsically more than it at first seems to be. It opens to itself. And all you need to do is look at it as it is to discover this very obvious fact. And then you're just in openness. And wherever you are in experience, you're in openness. And it doesn't matter what it looks like, because you look closer and it's openness. So it can look like dullness, it can look like anger, it can look like frustration, it can look like stupidity, but have another look and all of a sudden it's just like the night sky or something. Just this amazing open spatiality full of inconceivable and unspecifiable qualities.
And that must be what Dzogchen means by self-liberating.
Yeah, it's self-liberating because it already is like that. It already is that. And all you need to do is notice that fact. It doesn't need to be liberated in the sense it doesn't need to be transformed. It is already intrinsically in the condition that you would optimally transform it to. And so all you need to do is notice that fact, which doesn't take much effort because, again, it is the case, so it is noticeable.
Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
Okay, when you were talking to this gentleman over here, my mind jumped to a interview with Charlie Rose and a guy who wrote a book on creativity. And he was asking questions about creativity, and he says, Charlie Rose asked this guy, where does creativity come from? And he said, from the mind. It doesn't come from the muses. So, could you say something about that?
The mind as opposed to the muses?
Yeah.
Well, what is mind and what is muses? If you can find a mind that you can specify and define, or if you can find muses that you can specify or define, then that might be an interesting and meaningful distinction. But you can't find either. What exactly is the mind? No one can answer that question. What exactly is muses? I mean, aside from mythological, entities, who can say? I mean, you can say creativity arises mysteriously as a result of inspiration, and so you can say muses is a euphemism for inspiration. But even if you say that, what does that mean? Have you said anything with inspiration? That's just simply giving a fancy nomenclature to the mysterious fact that creativity appears. So it's arising from inspiration. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't add anything to the fact, and the fact is mysterious. I mean, creativity is happening right here. You said that that question just appeared out of nowhere. Where did it come from? That's creativity. I mean, would the muses do it? Did inspiration do it? Did your mind do it? Maybe, but those are just words for what? For this simple fact that shit happens, and you can't pin down how that happens, what that even means. I mean, that's the bottom line is, we are sitting here in the middle of absolute mystery. Every single aspect of what this is, every single aspect of what you are is mystery. Obviously, we all know that we've always known, you've always known you don't really know what anything is. I mean, when you were 1 year old, you knew you didn't know what anything was, and you had to learn all these words and learn to fake it and pass these tests in school and all this crap, but you knew it was just faking it. You still didn't really know what anything was. No one knows what anything is. People just pretend. People have forgotten that is the simple, obvious fact. So this is just about getting real. This is just about, I don't know what anything is. I never have known what anything is. I've never met anyone that knows what anything is. That's just reality. But it turns out to be empowering rather than being, disempowering, but because all this bravado and bullshit and posturing and claiming to have it together and all that is just a crock.
Right. Yeah, it surprises me every once in a while, like on the Charlie Rose show or something, they will ask this financial expert about the world economy, and then they'll say something, and then they said ultimately no one knows. No one knows.
Well, duh.
Yeah, I know, but it's interesting, because he's supposed to know and he doesn't know.
But all of that posturing is just gamesmanship. I have my doctorate in this and that. I'm accredited. I did my thesis, and I've cited all these books and this. It's all bullshit. Yeah. It's all ring around the rosy, I'm quoting this person who is quoting that person who's quoting. So we're quoting enough people that it seems to mean something, regardless of the fact that the first person we're quoting made it up, pulled it out of his ass. So.
Yeah.
All right, here's a question. You speak of objects and entities that open out and cannot be resolved. How does this reconcile with the idea that all such entities are utterly non-existent, mere apparitions in a clear sky? We make things up and later everyone accepts them as truth. There was another question there, but they didn't finish it.
Well, anyway, one question at a time. That's self-evident. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The fact that these entities are just made up and there's nothing there at all other than undefinable, let's call them qualities, is the opening. Nothing actually opens. It already is openness. Although there is also an intrinsic dynamism there, so it can look like an actual opening. But there's nothing to reconcile, because those are two ways of putting the same condition. In other words, anything that you think is a thing, you're making a claim that it's a thing. You're making a claim that it's an entity. And if you look closely, you'll find that it's just an arbitrary, a qualification of a certain set of experiential characteristics as having enough coherence to be distinguishable as an entity, and you're somehow holding those characteristics as distinguishable from other characteristics which you're excluding from being in that entity. But all of that process of inclusion and exclusion is completely arbitrary and imaginary. Nothing's actually included or excluded. All experience appears as a whole, and all characteristics appear as a field. So there are no entities. The entity is this, and it is infinite. It has no edges, no boundaries. You don't look at your experience and try and find the edges of it and hit up against a wall or something. It doesn't happen like that, does it?
So in this world of people that don't know what they know or what anything is, what are we supposed to do when we're, let's say, sick or have some health problems or whatever? We have to find someone who presumably knows more than we do, which maybe isn't that difficult to do.
Well, yeah, you give it your best shot.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Right, but I mean, like doctors, there are other various people around like that who supposedly know more.
Yeah, they may or may not. Who knows?
Yeah. That's right. It's still a crapshoot in that sense.
Well, of course, it's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Look at what happens.
Yeah. Right. So, what do you do in that kind of situation when you have to deal with something sort of like to do with quote real world kind of issues?
I give it my best shot.
Yeah. However you can. Right. I guess that's what everyone does anyway.
Of course.
Yeah. And
but no one knows what's actually happening. No one knows how it's going to actually work out.
Yeah.
You're optimistic maybe, or maybe not. Maybe you're pessimistic.
Right.
But you follow courses of action that you A, define as courses of action, and B, that you suppose will be possibly leading to a better outcome than other courses of action, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
It's like flipping a coin. You don't know which side's going to come down.
It may land on the edge or something. But, it seems that our chances are about the same, kind of regardless of what courses of action we take.
Well, it's hard to say. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's no real basis for assessing our chances either.
Yeah. Well, like, you've been using this word arbitrary tonight quite a bit.
Have I?
Yeah. And so arbitrary means kind of, it's when you're essentially saying something is a certain way because that's the way you say it is, right? Isn't that
well, I don't think things are arbitrary, and I don't think things happen arbitrarily, but I think that the way we differentiate things and the way we think about things is what's arbitrary. I think what things are and the way they happen is very precise, but inconceivable and infinite. So it can't be said what they are or how they are, but they are exactly what they are. But then when we start weighing into it and pretending we can say, that's when it's arbitrary.
Oh, okay.
I say, such and such is this, I'm this, I should do this. All of this that's completely arbitrary. In other words, that's your version of things. A person's version of things is arbitrary,
Right.
and virtually anything you can think or say is nothing more than your version of things, hence arbitrary. But the actuality of your condition is not arbitrary. It is exactly itself.
And what is it? What is that determined upon?
Itself, its nature, what it is. It's determined by what it is. And it can't be said what that is. But it's not, but it is not inaccessible because it's right here. I mean, this is the point. We're used to approaching our reality, the reality of our being, the reality of our experience, in terms of what we think about it, in terms of ideas about it. We don't have to. Experience is a direct energy engagement. It's like swimming. You are your experience. You are in your experience. You are navigating your experience very, very directly and entirely non-conceptually. And yet we don't notice that. Typically we're addicted to these conceptualizations, these descriptions of, oh, I can say who I am, I can say where I am, I can say what I'm doing, I can say how I plan to do it, Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. That's the arbitrary part, and it's not powerful or effective, whereas direct energy engagement is. You can't say what direct energy engagement actually is, of course, because you can't say what this is. But that doesn't mean it's not exactly what it is, and that doesn't mean you don't know exactly what it is and can't engage with it exactly as it is, but not in conceptual terms, because it's inconceivable. It's literally inconceivable. It just can't be conceived of. It's like, it's like infinity. It's just, you can't think of it. Your minds can't wrap around it. Doesn't mean it's not existent. Doesn't mean it's not even obvious, but you can't think it. You can't be said. Or irrational numbers like pi. The number pi, which is it's the exact measurement of how many times the diameter of a circle can go around its circumference, right? No one knows the exact value of pi. No, it is exactly what it is, but no one knows what it is. It can't be said. It's not that it isn't exactly what it is, it's that it cannot be said exactly what it is, because saying it involves specifying it, and it's unspecifiable.
Because it's infinite.
Because it's infinite. All of this is unspecifiable because it's infinite. It doesn't mean it's not actual, it doesn't mean it's not accessible, it's just unspecifiable. Like if I asked you exactly what's going on here right now, if you're honest, you'd say, I can't possibly tell you that. Right. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it isn't what it is, and that doesn't mean it's not right here and you can't be totally engaged in it as an actuality. But you can't specify any of that. You can't specify what it is, you can't specify how it is, right? But that doesn't negate it as an actuality, it just means it's unspecifiable. It doesn't lend itself to that mode of addressing it. You can't address it through specification. It's just simply not. It just doesn't. It's like apples and oranges. So it's like asking how many inches is in a year. It just doesn't correlate. It's meaningless. It's gibberish.
So if you ask the question again, what exactly is going on here? The answer could be, well, as you see.
Sure, that's a good answer. Or this is a good answer because it's not specifying it. It's indicating it, but not specifying it. And an indication is honest, is true, because then you're indicating the actuality, which is the answer to that. What's going on here is this actuality. You can't say what it is, you can't think what it is, but it is what it is, and it's right here. You are it, you are totally engaged with it. You just can't think about it or talk about it. It's not rational.
And when you say specifiable, though, that sort of sounds like some kind of measurement. Does that imply that? Or?
Sure. Well, it implies definition. Defining it. You could say that's measuring it.
Yeah. And that's not possible.
No.
Yeah. So here we are.
Here we are. Yes. And that's powerful. Because it's actual. Here we are. Can't say what that means, but you can feel it. You can live it. You can know it. And in that feeling, in that living, in that knowing is openness, is vitality, is nourishment, is actuality. That's what's actually holding you up. The earth isn't holding you up. The earth is just something that you're specifying. Can't say what the earth actually is, but that you can't say is what is holding you up. Not the earth.
Yeah.
The earth is just a concept.
No turtles all the way down the line.
Well, you can say turtles all the way down, except there's no turtles.
Yeah. Or any line
When
either.
there's no turtles, there's just all the way down.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
I gotta find it. Okay. Is awareness arising out of absolute also just a mystery, never to be, quote, understood?
Also? Was that also just a mystery? Was there an
Yeah.
also in there?
Yes, there was.
Also in addition to what?
Right.
I mean, if everything is a mystery, and if that is indicating an actuality, then of course it's a mystery. Well, here's a simpler way to put it. I'll pose a counter question.
But it's
If you can tell me something that's not a mystery, let's talk about that.
well, but I think the question they're asking, because they put the word understood in quotes, it's that bit, perhaps.
Say it again.
Okay. They've got the word understood in
Well,
quotes.
say the whole question.
Oh, you want me to read it again? Okay. Is awareness arising out of absolute also just a mystery, never to be understood? Quote, understood.
Yeah, everything. Nothing can be understood in rational terms, or in conceptual terms, or in definitional terms. But everything can be known through direct engagement, through participation, through identity. You know it because you are it. You know, in the ancient mysteries, the overall catchphrase was "Know thyself," and that's doable. But it's not knowing thyself rationally, knowing thyself conceptually, knowing thyself by defining yourself. It's knowing yourself by being the fullness of what you are, which is this astounding condition that is appearing here absolutely.
Okay.
That makes absolutely no sense. It's totally undescribable. It's totally unfathomable. And yet it's completely actual and accessible. Very obvious, in fact.
From a previous question, should the world be ignored, and why bother to keep eating or breathing?
Well, you don't need to. But on the other hand, trying to stop could be a lot of effort. And there's no world to be ignored. You don't need to ignore the world or not ignore the world. There is no world. The world is defined into existence. Your experience appears in the instant, whether you ignore it or not. It's not showing up because you want it to or because you don't want it to. And if you can ignore your experience, how would you do that? How do you turn off experience? You could try not eating or breathing, but I'm not sure that would work.
Peter, I came in with a couple of small noticing questions, and you.
There's no small noticing questions.
Your opening remarks is a nice segue into that, so I'll ask them. I've had a lot of trouble really understanding your concept of noticing. I mean, to make it really specific and clear in my mind what you're asking us to do. But what I'm coming to, and I want to let you critique what I would call noticing, at least at present, right now. If I look through the senses, taking all the senses, all as one thing, one unit. I mean, I take everything as a unit, not fixating, not stopping on anything. Take everything just as a unit, and I hang out there for a little while. Then I begin to notice a subtler layer of things. In other words, something, because I'm not fixating on any one thing, I'm not dragged into that, then I just see it all as one. Why? Well, just for instance, take for instance, if I look at If I look at physical things, I hear physical things, I put all of that into one unit. Then I begin to be aware of thought, for instance. If I add thought to it, and I hang out there for a while, I begin to be aware of maybe feelings, just for instance. And it goes like that. My noticing doesn't really have to do with looking at one thing and seeing anything about it. I've never been able to do more than just stay with that one thing and get bored. But I do this thing now a little bit more. It seems to, if I don't stop with one thing, it lets me go into another layer of, I start noticing things,
Right.
that are of a different genre.
Right.
And if I add that, I notice things of a subtler genre.
Right.
And it sort of goes on like that.
Mm-hmm.
Can we call that noticing?
That can be one mode of noticing. I would define noticing more comprehensively as being with experience without holding it to be any particular way, or without interpreting it. Now, having said that, experience is slippery. When you say experience, experience is one thing, but it's not one thing, because there's infinite ways in which experience can appear. Experience can be opened up, generalized to a field. It can be focused in on a relatively narrow focus. It can be skipping around on layers of subtlety of dimensions, jumping from one to another. It can be, in other words, it's not very well behaved. It doesn't. It's very nonlinear. Its intrinsic nature is, if you're with it any particular way, to slip out from under you and become something else. So it's very slippery. Which is fine, because that's an aspect of what experience is. And noticing includes all of that, any of that and all of that. So being with any qualities of experience at all, including the modes you just suggested, which is fine, the main thing is to be with it unqualifiedly. In other words, without qualifying it as this or that. What blocks noticing is thinking you know what anything is, on any level of subtlety, most of which is done unconsciously, so that's the challenge. And so noticing, the power of noticing, true noticing, is being with experience directly, without qualifying it as being any which way or other. In other words, without defining it at all, without thinking you know what it is already. But again, exactly how that looks is literally infinitely variable because of the intrinsic slipperiness of experience. You can be zoomed in on one thing in one aspect in one area in one sense field, or you can be opened up into many sense fields correspondingly, or have the whole thing cascading and opening and flowering from one thing to another. And experience can and does do all of that effortlessly and uncontainably. You can't stop it from doing that. When it wants to take off, it does so. But any and all of that can be a field of noticing, because the important aspect of noticing is about not qualifying, not degrees of stability or degrees of localization. But all that's fine. In other words, if you do have sort of an opened aspect of localization like you suggest, that's great. Or that's fine, but the main thing is to be with it unqualifiedly, rather than even qualifying it insofar as vision is vision and hearing and sound is sound will defeat noticing. Powerful noticing is being with experience with absolutely zero qualification. Just this, and you can't say or think anything about it. Just this.
Well, if I do that, what do I notice?
Well, you can't say, can you? If you can say, then it's not noticing. Because to say it, you have to go to qualification. That's the whole point. This is unsayable. This is inconceivable, and the very essence of noticing is noticing the inconceivable, noticing the inconceivability of actuality. To depart rationality, to depart qualification into absolute actuality, which is extremely strange by virtue of the fact that it is absolutely unthinkable. The unthinkable is strange from the human point of view because anything that's not thinkable is, by definition, off the map. You know, it's here there be dragons kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Let me add one other one. This is just, I'm sort of testing something because if I close my eyes, I see flashes of light and lines of, unspecified sort of energy.
Uh-huh.
And I've been, I guess I'll use the word noticing, that with my eyes open, those things are still going on.
Yes.
And I have not been able to determine, by trying to watch this closely, whether that's I can be projecting that, saying that should be there, and I'm imagining it.
Right.
I don't know if that's imagination or if that's really true.
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because that's more qualification. You can't say what imagination is. You can't say what projection is. So why bother to distinguish that?
Right.
If you're making that distinction, then you're not in noticing, so it's irrelevant.
Right. So imagination doesn't matter anyway. So
right.
I'm
exactly.
just trying to be very clinical and specific here.
Yeah.
And then
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's not necessary, really. I guess.
It's not necessary. I mean, that's the very nature of noticing is letting go of being clinical.
All right. I'll try to notice that one.
In the words of the great prophet David Byrne, stop making sense.
One of the things that's that I've been in that's been happening with my noticing is that I find myself telling myself that where I'm trying to define situations and events, and so now I've just naturally started telling myself I can't know what any of this is. So if a thought comes, I say, I can't know what that is. I can't know what this is, and What are your comments on that? Because it seems to be probably more of a negative approach than positively engaging with the energy. But
no, it's you're negating calling it something, but when you negate calling it something, the experience doesn't go away, does it? That's the positivity. The positivity is what doesn't go away. You can negate calling it this. You can negate calling it that. You can negate defining it, but you haven't. But when you do that, the experience doesn't disappear.
No,
There's still something there. That's the positivity. That's what counts. But that's fine. I mean, and even though, I mean, go from asserting that to just directly seeing that it's the truth. What's seeing? How can you know what that is? What is thinking? What is defining anything? How can you look at a chair and know it's a chair and know it's separate from the floor? I mean, you can't say how you can do it. It's a miraculous power. It's a city. It's inconceivable. How can you designate chairs? How can you recognize a human being when you see one? You can't say. It's inconceivable.
Yeah, it seems that, it is the fact that the mind is just always throwing out definitions and captions and labels, and it just does this endlessly.
Yeah. And
then you've got all of these emotions that are swirling around, and so the best way that I'm able to, engage with the energy is to just tell myself that I can't know what any of this is, and that seems to help. I guess there's levels of noticing, and you
could say there's levels of noticing, but any noticing is good noticing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Being with presence is noticing. And experience is present. And anytime you peel back a layer of defining it as this or that, then in a way you're more sensitive to the naked presence. That's good. That's good noticing. So you look out the window and you see a tree. That's fine, and then you go, oh, wow, I'm seeing light. I'm not seeing a tree. So that's good noticing because you peeled away the layer of the tree to light. Then you can peel away light. Say, I don't know what light is, and bang, you peel away light. And then, but the presence of experience doesn't go away, does it? It's not a tree anymore. It's not even light anymore. But here it is. And so that's how you penetrate, moving deeper and deeper into noticing. It's kind of like peeling the layers of an onion.
So when you talk about experience, for me that means that presence never goes away. There's presence is always here, but experience. I understand that to be the flavor of the energy.
No, there's no qualifications. Experience equals presence, equals flavor, equals energy, equals consciousness.
Okay.
There's only one thing going on here. This is one thing. It doesn't have parts. It doesn't have aspects.
Yeah.
And it is flavors. It is presence. It is energy. It is consciousness. It is all of these things. But these things aren't things. They aren't separate. They aren't differentiable. It's just this actuality that is here, that is infinite, that is one thing, that is never departs from itself, and that is absolutely inconceivable in every way. Everything that's ever been said or thought about it, and ever will be said or thought about it, is partial, hopelessly partial, and does not capture what it really is. But it is what it really is, obviously, explicitly, and right here, right now, always. And at the beginning of tonight's talk, I was talking about, don't underestimate how incredibly profound and incredibly transformative this is. Just contacting this stuff even slightly, feeling this presence even slightly, is not a small event. It is huge. It is major. It is what the finish line of true spirituality is all about.
I just wonder if you have any comments with regard to, I was reading where Ajahn Chah saw two Western monks that had been there about 3 years or something, and he just went over and said, "Are you suffering?" And they said, "No, we're not." And he says, "Oh, that really makes me happy." What does that mean to you?
Not much.
No? Okay, how about this one?
There was a rabbi, a priest, and they went into the... Oh, sorry.
Okay, all right. So, all these tourists were coming through when Ajahn Buddhadasa was there, and they were using the bathroom, and a lot of noise and everything, and then they finally all got back on the bus and left. And someone said, is it good that they're coming here? And they said, well, I got to use the bathroom. That's the main reason why they come.
Hard to argue with that. Get your priorities straight.
So this rabbi, this priest, and this blonde walk into the bar, and the bartender says, "What is this, some kind of joke?"
Actually, I just noticed something, or I connected the dots. So many of these Zen stories that are hitting, whacking, or calling attention to the beauty of something, or something. I just connected it with what you're saying. They're just calling attention to this, is it not?
Yeah, that's all.
And it can't be expressed otherwise. They did the best they could.
Yeah, of course.
Can't fault them for it.
No, sure.
Yeah. That's all.
I'm going to be rude and excuse myself for a moment. I'll be right back.
Peter, I have just a comment. When you speak about we can't know what any of this is, that would mean, I think, or I guess, that we can't know what it feels like to be with actuality.
No. You can know that. You know nothing but that. What you can't know is you can't know what anything actually, you can't define anything. You can't know what it actually is in terms of defining it. You can and do know what this actually feels like, because you're feeling it right now. You're feeling it all the time. This is the important point. You can and do know direct experience because you're in direct experience right now, nothing but. But you can't say what that is. And we're used to thinking we can. This is the important distinction. This is the important thing to notice, that all of our descriptions of this direct experience that we all know so intimately are erroneous, are inadequate, are inaccurate.
I mean, I understand that we that presence and this is always here. However, and maybe I'm just being, maybe I'm trying to conceptualize it, but I have, this gets filtered by the mind, and so that seems to be the blocking factor to completely and fully experiencing this.
But the mind doesn't actually filter direct experience. It claims to, it pretends to, but it doesn't actually do that. Because the mind doesn't actually get in the way of direct experience. The mind happens in the mind space, let's call it. For example, vision is appearing directly within your experience. Your mind, what your mind thinks about the vision is not blocking the vision, is not in the way of the vision. It's over here off to the side, let's say, commenting on the vision. Now, we may be used to being seduced by our mental descriptions to the point where we give them more attention than we give our direct experience. But in actuality, the mind and the mind's arguments and descriptions don't actually filter anything, don't actually block or modify direct experience at all. And when you notice this, then that makes your direct experience much more easily accessible, because you don't need to stop the mind, you just bypass it. Let the mind go on chattering, but just doing it over here. It's not actually doing it in the way of anything. It claims to be thinking about everything, but in actuality it's not thinking about anything, it's just thinking its own thoughts. The mind is very arrogant. The mind makes all sorts of baseless claims, but it can't back them up. It claims to know everything and it doesn't know shit. Over here.
So, where did this way of thinking that you talk about this way of looking, seeing, whatever. Do you have any sense of where that originated, or where where it came from?
It originates right here. It originates with simply looking at the condition that is apparent and describing it as it is.
Well, I mean, how long has it been around then? I mean, hundreds of years, thousands of years, or?
I don't know. It's been around any time that anyone noticed it, I guess.
Yeah. It's not any specific tradition of any particular culture or anything like that, or?
I don't think so. I think it shows up in many traditions and in many cultures, obliquely and to degrees. But I mean, this is simply, I think, I would argue it's the nature of actuality, and it's simply a matter of acknowledging the actuality of our condition, of the nature of experience, how it works, what it is, and the nature of our conceptualizing faculties, and the relationship of the conceptualizing faculties to actuality, which is oblique at best.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
One could say that it has been in pretty much every tradition.
Yeah, I think so, to various degrees, yeah. But tradition is not important. Tradition is often claimed as an authority or lineage or all these sorts of things, as some kind of, is giving some kind of notion some power. Notions have power dependent upon actuality. That's the base, that's the totality of it. Something that is true, and its power comes from the fact that it's true, not from who said it was true or for how long it's been said it's true, or that so-and-so said it was true and I heard it from them. So that, all of that is just hearsay, and who cares? What matters is accuracy. What matters is factuality. So the interesting thing is, what is the fact here? What is the case here? What is actual here? What's actually going on? And all that I recommend personally is looking at that question for yourself and seeing the actuality of it, which is doable because here it is. Right? Here is actuality. Here is experience. You want to know what experience is, it's right here. So just simply look and see. And I argue you will notice something that is roughly along the lines of some aspects of what I'm suggesting. Or maybe not. But that's fine, because the important thing is the actuality, not what some guy sitting in the front of some room in some chair is saying. I mean, who cares what I say? That's not what counts. What counts is the fact. And look for yourself. Here it is. What is this? What is going on here? John?
What just always strikes me as so amazing is that this undefinable reality, it just shines from its own side, and it is. You hear a lot about one can get the impression that somehow this has to be earned, that it's like a great reward, where I have a sense that it has nothing to do with that. It's simply the nature of existence.
Yes. Yes. It just happens to be the way it happens to be.
Yeah.
And it happens to be, I would argue, very fortunate that it happens to be that way.
Right. Truth is on our side.
Yeah, it turns out that that's the case, and it's a glorious and wonderful and astounding fact that is so.
And that's really what I'm hearing from you and from Longshengpa. And these other teachings, I'm sure they have, they're pointing in that direction, but my mind, it's almost become an imprint that I read that, and my experience has been that I read it and I feel that this is beyond me, that I have to go through 3 countless eons of whatever adventures to be able to. So it's an interesting sort of conceptual point of view that I can see that that's not really relevant.
Yeah, a simple way to look at it is in terms of long paths and short paths. There are many, 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 many long paths, and there's one short path. And the short path is what is already the case, simply resting in that. And it turns out that what is already the case is beyond the most wonderful result that could result from any path. So again, you have a sort of a karmic choice, not that you necessarily have a conscious choice, but in fact, you have a karmic choice. Well, you can go all these long paths and go meandering, accumulating all of these different effort-filled approaches and developing this and acquiring that and so on and so forth. Or you can just let go into this actuality, and there is a finish line. I mean, an analogy I like to use is, suppose there's a 100-mile foot race, but the catch is you get to start the race anywhere you want. Where would you start it? I would start it at the finish line. And this is the nature of the short path, is start at the finish line. The ultimate goal is what this turns out to be, so why not just start there?
What is it in Dzogchen? View, meditation, and fruition?
Sure, yeah, they classify in various different ways. But in Dzogchen, I mean, that's sort of a general classification of all the Buddhist paths in Tibetan terms. But in Dzogchen, they are one. The view and the path and the fruit are one. What they say, the short description of Dzogchen is you use the fruit as the path, and that is the view. So you use the goal as the path. So you use realization as the path to realization. And the view is that. So it all collapses. Again, all this elaboration turns out to be unnecessary because it's elaboration of essentially one thing that is already the case. So why bother with the elaboration? Who needs it?
Yeah, years ago, I mentioned this before. I'll tell it briefly. I met with Dzogchen Poma Rinpoche, who's a contemporary Kagyu teacher, and this was in 1991. And I had the opportunity to have a private meeting with him, and he said, "What is your practice?" And I said, "Rinpoche, I don't understand all this complicated tantric stuff, and let alone try and practice it." And he said, "That's all right. Well, what do you do?" And I said, I just look into the nature of mind, what is experiencing this moment, that type of thing." And he said, that's actually the essence of the whole thing. Anyway, and sometimes people get caught up in the glitz and glamour of these elaborate practices. So
Sure. Yeah. If you can do that, you don't need to do anything else. Because again, that's beginning the race at the finish line. And, if you have the choice, why would you make another choice than that? Why not begin at the finish line? I mean, hey, what could be easier? Well, it's quitting time. Thank you all very much for coming, and have a lovely whatever you have. Sure. Thanks for coming. It's good to see you.